Welcome to Bookview TV. I'm Dennis Campbell. Now, each week we discuss a book here with its author, and today's is a real treat. Now, when it comes to sheer force and strength on a battlefield, few, if any, can match the power of the U.S. Armed Forces and their coalition partners. From Afghanistan to Iraq, the presence of thousands of well-trained and equipped troops sends shivers up the spine of even the most determined insurgent. Their limited, quote, success, close quote, is through tactical guerrilla moves such as IEDs, suicide bombings, and the like. Now, the mantra heard amongst the general population since well before 9/11 by American and British citizens is, why do they hate us so? Well, one man takes a stab at answering that question and teaches us through his own lessons of having been a warrior what the real costs are to us all and how we must change ourselves to find peace in that region. Because it is, after all, only through one who has direct experience of war can we be taught the power of peace. Now, our guest this week is J. Robert Dubois. Rivet Rob, as he calls himself, is the author of the book Powerful Peace, a Navy SEAL's Lessons on Peace from a Lifetime of War. It's a riveting page-turner published by Morgan James Publishing in New York. Now, Rob is described as a smart power authority, and in his day job as a security and policy advisor, he assisted U.S., British, and Iraqi forces in Baghdad. He's a multilingual Navy SEAL with experience in more than 30 countries, and he retired from military service in 2006, then headed back to Iraq and Afghanistan in support of commanders struggling with complex threat situations. He presented his Think Like the Adversary workshop to military units in the hottest combat zones, to Fortune 500 corporate customers and government organizations, from the National Counterterrorism Center to the Fort Knox Mint Police. He's also served in the Deputy Secretary of Defense's Senior Integration Group and directed operations for the Department of Defense Red Team. Now, Rob is currently chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee of the Homeland Security Foundation of America. He's founder and CEO of Seal of Peace Consulting, and he lives with his family in the Washington, D.C. area and works pretty much anywhere on the planet. Rob Dubois, welcome to Bookview TV.
Thank you, Dennis.
Now, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I really enjoyed going through your book. You speak in it of the real cost of war being to any idea of peace throughout this book. Is it fair to say that one of the many morals, if you will, of this story is that the U.S. wages war very well, but perhaps needs to focus more of its efforts on waging the peace afterwards?
Yes. You've heard the grievances, the complaints about the no-exit strategy, a lack of an exit strategy with Iraq, for example. And I'm just pulling one example out of the universe of real historical lessons we've picked up on. The U.S. as a dominant power is very capable at breaking things, and we are, and I can speak for, not for the U.S. government, that would be presumptuous. I can speak for many of us in the U.S. government, around the intelligence community, policy community, military community, and peacemaking development communities, that there is a hybridization going on. There's a maturation of the national power, understanding that we have to use more tools. You're hearing it from the president, from the DepSecDef, the SecDef, the Secretary of State. We need to balance our approaches, use more tools of development and diplomacy and culture, in addition to the D of defense.
Rob, you divided this book into 4 sections: body, mind, heart, and soul. And it's a collection of sort of short story essays, if you will, on aspects of our decade-plus long series of conflicts. What was the motivation behind that decision?
Well, you know, the subtitle is A Navy SEAL's Lessons on Peace from a Lifetime at War. I've literally had a lifetime at war since the Cold War. In the mid-'80s, when I came into the U.S. Navy as a not special operations then, I was a Soviet specialist. So I learned Russian, I learned Russian culture, I learned Russian order of battle. And I began observing early on that there were human aspects behind the Great Menace, of the Red Menace, Reagan, the empire, the evil empire. At one point, President Reagan used that term. So those were my first enemies, the Great Dragon of the Soviet Union. We've heard since the Soviet Union fell that there's one expression is that we slew the dragon and 1,000 serpents rose in its place. That's what we're facing today since the early 90s. But in the mid-'80s, I had one good proper enemy. We had one enemy we could focus on, and everybody was kind of in a status of balance. So we enjoyed that, if you will, even though it was war. We moved after the fall of the wall, the fall of the Soviet Union, into a decade of chaos and the decade of chaos, of course, that followed 9/11 in 2001. So my observations in 34 countries have been that there is a human underlying nature, a commonality. There's the common ground we can focus on. Administrations tend to fight it out. Administrations tend to go this nation against that nation, but the people beneath it, even the people within the administrations, even the people in the regimes, have common ground functions that we can tap into. We can find ways to go beyond the assumptions of threat, the assumption of hostility, while keeping a real eye on that. Davidi no providi, trust but verify, as with the Soviets, indicated a healthy perspective on the fact that we can move forward, not simply dig our heels in with international relations without throwing down all our weapons and assuming everybody will do the same.
Now, you speak of enemies being more than just named Ivan, as in the case of the Russians, or Omar, as in the case of the Middle East. Yet you talked about some rather unspeakable crimes. I mean, when you're out there, you come across situations of rape, abuse of children, just sheer sectarian hatred in those war zones. Talk about those as enemies and the impact it has on the people there.
When a local population has a woman decapitated in the street as a lesson to the rest of the community that her son, the snitch, who was then tortured to death, should be held as an example, a poster child for the community. Don't snitch on us because we're going to be tough on you. That doesn't create a loving community toward the insurgency. It doesn't create an admiration or an affection for the insurgents in this case, or gangs in other states. It creates a compliant intimidation. My observations over the planet have been that people generally want to have a secure home for their family, individual people in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in my continent. There's a capacity we have to, if you will, be a little more transparent, a little more frank, a little more humble individual. As I've learned, like I said, I've been speaking to people in 34 countries over the past 25, 28 years. It is possible for us to understand the perspective of somebody who simply can't rise up against. For example, in Basra, I was down there in Basra in Iraq on the Gulf. It was very common for my American or Brit friends to say, "Why don't they just man up and take over these? The jihad, I'm not jihadists, but insurgents in this territory are they're vastly outmanned." But nobody's going to be the first guy to put his own family at risk by stepping out and saying, "Let's resist this. Let's form a revolution like the American Revolution." One of my chapters in Powerful Peace talks about the actual real experience of a man who is being confronted by Americans saying, "Why don't you man up? We had a revolution. It was dangerous. It was scary, but we got control of our nation in the end." And it's just a little too trite to assume that anybody or any group of men could gather in a very strongly held threat area, like the decapitations on the street or the torturing to death. So what I'm trying to get across is that this is not, as we say in Powerful Peace, not rainbows and unicorns. There are very serious threats out there. One of the most common techniques in Iraq for a brutal murder was to put a drill bit through the temple of a man and kill him slowly with a drill going into the brain. This is not something we can reason through. The suicide bomber that walks into the room with us, if I'm sitting with you and he's walking into the room and I see a plunger in his hand and a bulky vest and he's getting ready to do something dramatic, then I shoot him and he falls and dies. Or he pushes the button and he falls and dies, and we do too. So when I give little simple examples, I can go into much more detail that I don't think your viewers would appreciate, because the reality of hostility, the reality of thuggery, the reality of brutality is that it exists and always has existed in our species. It is not something we can suddenly magically talk through, but it is something that we can confront where it stands and not overreact to by using too much force in a population to try and control the threat and therefore create, as Bob Gates said, are we creating more than we're killing?
Well, yeah, that's a really good point. And when I sit and I watch people like Representative King or Bachman or Gomert, or listen to some of these talk radio crazies like Rush Limbaugh and Fox News pundits, and they seem to behave in this openly xenophobic, racist, anti-Muslim manner. What message does this send about us as a people when we see our leaders behaving with this level of just hatred, for lack of a better word?
I would caveat my response to say that I don't believe our leadership writ large, that in general, Obama, Hillary, now, I don't remember his name.
John Kerry?
John Kerry, not Kerry, or Hagel. Not generally our leadership in the United States is Islamophobic or bigoted in a visible way. There are individuals. You mentioned King, and I think some of the things that Representative King has said are counterproductive to our international relations and to our cultural relations with other populations, specifically when we talk about Islamic issues with Muslims in general, American and non-American Muslims.
Well, I want to dive a little bit more into this when we come back with part 2 of our program here on Bookview TV with Rob and his book, A Powerful Peace, a Navy SEAL's Lessons on Peace from a Lifetime of War. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the specter of war as a powerful motivator for him to speak out on behalf of peace. All that when Bookview continues in just a moment. Stay right here.